You won't believe what went down in my neighborhood. An 8-year-old girl was riding her bike, laughing, just being a kid, when a man in a fake HOA cop vest stormed up. He pulled out a baseball bat and smashed her in the head. But here's the twist. He had no idea who her father was. Because the moment that black truck came screeching down the street, everything changed. That little girl's dad wasn't just any father. He was a decorated detective. And the so-called HOA cop? He was about to pay in the hardest way possible. Watch till the end. You'll want to see justice served. The morning air carried that calm hush that only comes on Saturdays, when most families are still waking up and the neighborhood is just beginning to stir. I was trimming the hedges, sweat clinging to my brow, when a strange figure caught my eye. A man, tall and wiry, was pacing up and down the street in a black vest. The words HOA Cop stretched across his chest in bold white letters, as if the uniform itself could command respect. He had a clipboard tucked under one arm and a radio clipped to his shoulder, but even from across the street I could tell something was off. The vest looked cheap, like it had been pulled out of a party store clearance bin. The patch was frayed, dangling loose at the edges. His whole image screamed costume rather than authority. That was the first time I laid eyes on Derek Miles. He wasn't on the HOA board. He wasn't affiliated with law enforcement in any way. He was just a bitter man, full of misplaced rage and delusions of power, who had taken it upon himself to become the self-appointed police of our community. He harassed families, issued fake citations, and roamed the streets like a predator searching for his next target. That day, his target was the Sanchez family. Across the street, 8-year-old Maria Sanchez wobbled on her pink bike, a helmet bobbing on her head as she giggled and tried to stay balanced. The little girl wasn't bothering anyone. She was just being a kid, circling the cul-de-sac in front of her own home. But Derek stormed up to her with a bark so sharp it made me freeze mid-swing with my hedge clippers. "You can't ride here," he shouted, his voice echoing off the houses. "This is community property, and you're trespassing." Maria's laughter fell away, replaced by wide-eyed confusion. She tried to pedal toward her driveway, but Derek stepped closer, chest puffed like a soldier on a battlefield. His words grew harsher, crueler, until I saw the first tremble in Maria's hands as she gripped the handlebars. I wanted to intervene, but it all happened so fast. Derek snapped. He reached into the bed of his truck and pulled out a baseball bat. For a split second, I thought he'd swing it at her bike tires to scare her off. But no, he aimed higher. With a crack that seemed to freeze the air, the bat connected with the side of Maria's head. Her little body crumpled instantly, toppling to the pavement. Blood trickled down from her temple, pooling under her pink helmet. Neighbors screamed. My stomach lurched as the hedge clippers fell from my hands, the metallic clang drowned by the chaos. And Derek? He stood there as if he had accomplished something. Chest out, chin raised, he gripped that bat like a trophy and shouted about rules and obedience, as though he had the right to enforce anything. I rushed forward with the other neighbors, but before any of us could reach Maria, I heard the rumble of a truck engine tearing down the street. A black pickup roared to a stop, tires screeching so hard they left black streaks across the asphalt. The driver's door swung open, and Daniel Sanchez stepped out, face carved from pure full. His badge glinted on his belt, unmistakable to anyone who knew what authority truly looked like. Derek had just struck the wrong child. He didn't know yet, but the little girl he'd attacked wasn't just Maria Sanchez. She was the daughter of a decorated detective with the county sheriff's department, and Derek Miles was about to discover the difference between playing cop and facing the real thing. Daniel didn't even wait for the engine to cool before he was sprinting across the yard. Neighbors instinctively stepped aside as he dropped to his knees beside his daughter. Paramedics had just arrived, kneeling quickly to lift Maria onto a stretcher, but Daniel clutched her tiny hand before they wheeled her away. "Daddy's here, baby girl," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time anyone could remember. "You're going to be okay." Her hand was limp, her helmet cracked down the middle. For a moment, Daniel's entire world hung by a thread. But when he stood, the softness in his face hardened into something else. Rage sharpened into purpose. He was no longer just Maria's father. He was Detective Daniel Sanchez, and someone had just assaulted his daughter in broad daylight. His eyes locked on Derek. The fake cop still clutched his bat, defiant, lips curled into a sneer. "Drop it," Daniel ordered, his voice low but so sharp it sliced through the screaming and sirens around us. Derek actually smirked. "I'm acting under HOA authority. That kid was breaking the rules. I had every right." Gasps rose from the crowd. Neighbors pulled out their phones, recording, documenting, making sure every second of Derek's delusion was captured. But Daniel didn't flinch. In one smooth motion, he lunged forward, twisted the bat from Derek's grip, and shoved him hard against his own truck. "You laid hands on my daughter," Daniel growled, his face so close to Derek's that the man shrank against the metal. "You think some vest and clipboard make you the law? You're nothing but a criminal." The bravado started to crumble. Derek's eyes darted around the growing circle of neighbors. Phones were raised, every lens pointed at him, capturing his fall from the fake authority he had clung to for years. "I was just enforcing community standards," he blurted, his voice rising in panic. "You don't scare me." That's when Daniel reached behind his belt and pulled out his badge. He slammed it against Derek's chest, holding it there until Derek's eyes widened. "You should be scared," Daniel said, his tone like ice. "Because I'm not just her father. I'm Detective Daniel Sanchez, and you just assaulted a child. My child." The color drained from Derek's face. His lips parted, fumbling for excuses. Wait, it was an accident. I didn't mean—" Daniel cut him off with a barked command to the uniformed deputies now spilling onto the scene. "Cuff him, now!" The deputies hesitated only a second before snapping cold steel around Derek's wrists. He thrashed, sputtering as the crowd's murmurs grew louder. "You can't do this to me!" Derek shouted, his voice cracking. "I'm with the HOA. I have rights." Daniel leaned in close, his words calm but venomous. "You're not with the HOA. You're a fraud with a costume vest. And the only right you've got left is the right to remain silent." The crowd erupted. Mothers who had once feared Derek's clipboard sighed with relief. Fathers whispered to one another. Neighbors shook their heads in disbelief. For years, Derek had been terrorizing the street. Now his mask was ripped away, and the truth was spilling out for everyone to see. But Daniel wasn't done. Not even close. He didn't just want Derek arrested, he wanted justice. Real justice. The kind that made sure Derek would never lay hands on another child again. And Derek was about to find out that a father's wrath, especially one armed with the law, wasn't something you could escape. The cuffs clicked shut, and Derek Miles was forced onto the curb like a criminal finally unmasked. His cheap vest sagged in the dust, his fake HOA Cop patch torn at the edges. Deputies pressed him down, but Daniel wasn't focused on Derek anymore. His eyes stayed on Maria as the paramedics carefully lifted her stretcher into the waiting ambulance. Her little hand slipped from his grasp, dangling limp as they slid her inside. Daniel climbed in behind them without hesitation, his badge flashing under the strobe lights. He pressed his palm over hers once more, whispering promises only a father could make. "Daddy's right here. I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever." But before the ambulance doors closed, he turned and locked eyes with Derek. The man sat slumped on the curb, spitting excuses, rage still twisting his face. There was no swagger left, no fake power, just a hollow shell of the bully who thought a vest could make him untouchable. "Make sure the DA sees every second of that footage," Daniel snapped at the deputies, his voice cut like steel. "And add charges for child endangerment and impersonating an officer." The deputies nodded, already collecting phones from neighbors who eagerly stepped forward. For months, some for years, Derek had harassed families, trespassing onto lawns, threatening fines, intimidating kids. But now the evidence flowed like a dam bursting. Mothers shoved video clips into the deputies' hands. Fathers gave statements about threats and lies. One man held up his phone high. "It's live," he said. "Thousands are watching this right now." Derek's bravado cracked further. "You can't do this. I was protecting the neighborhood. I was the only law here," he yelled from the back seat of the cruiser, his voice breaking as the door slammed shut. Daniel's reply was cold and final. "The law doesn't wear Amazon vests and swing bats at children. You're done." Bien, yaceres. The ambulance tore down the street, sirens wailing. Daniel kept his hand on Maria's as they sped toward the hospital, every muscle in his jaw locked. He had seen violent men before, but never had one dared to hurt his own child. This wasn't just another case. This was personal. By evening, the sheriff's office issued a statement. Derek Miles, 42, arrested on multiple felony counts: assault with a deadly weapon, child endangerment, impersonating an officer, and obstruction of justice. His bail was denied. The footage spread like wildfire, local news anchors replaying the moment Derek puffed out his chest, and declared himself HOA authority before swinging the bat. His fall from fake power became a viral spectacle, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood exhaled. The man who had terrorized them with threats and false authority was finally where he belonged, behind bars. But Daniel knew this was only the beginning. Courtrooms weren't kind to men who laid hands on children. Derek was about to face a justice system that Daniel had spent his career helping enforce. And Daniel was determined to see the system work, not just for his daughter, but for every family Derek had tormented. Court day came faster than anyone expected. Derek's arrest had ignited a storm of outrage across the county. Parents packed the courthouse steps, news cameras swarmed the sidewalks, and every major outlet replayed the chilling video. Derek, in his knockoff vest, shouting about HOA rules, the bat swinging, Maria crumpling to the ground. The jury didn't even need convincing. The evidence was overwhelming. Daniel took the stand, not just as Maria's father, but as Detective Sanchez. His voice never wavered as he described what he'd seen, how Derek had terrorized families for months under a fabricated title, and how that violence had finally escalated into striking a child. The jury watched, checked the videos, listened to neighbors recount Derek's threats, and studied the torn vest and bat entered as evidence. Derek tried to defend himself, stammering about protecting the neighborhood and just doing his duty, but the courtroom wasn't buying it. The prosecutor leaned into every hole in his story, reminding the jury that there was no such thing as an HOA cop, only a man pretending to be one. Every excuse Derek offered only made him look more delusional. The verdict came swift, guilty on all counts, felony assault with a deadly weapon, impersonating a public officer, child endangerment, obstruction of justice. The judge's gavel echoed through the room as Derek was sentenced to 25 years in state prison, with no chance of early release. For Daniel, it wasn't about vengeance. It was about closure. Maria had survived. After surgery and long weeks of therapy, she slowly regained her strength. She still bore a faint scar on her temple, but she was alive, smiling again, her pink helmet replaced by a sturdier one as she learned to ride without fear. The community rallied around her, covering sidewalks with chalk drawings and messages of love. And the neighborhood itself changed. Families who had once lived under Derek's shadow found their voices. Mothers who once avoided the street now stood shoulder to shoulder, watching over kids as they played. Fathers who once clenched their teeth in silence shook Daniel's hand and thanked him, not just for being a cop, but for being a father who refused to let injustice slide. As for Derek, he faded into obscurity, locked behind prison walls, his HOA cop vest sealed in an evidence bag like a relic of arrogance. The man who once strutted with fake authority now had none. On the day Maria finally got back on her bike, Daniel walked beside her, hand hovering near her shoulder. She wobbled a little at first, then steadied herself, pedaling forward with a wide grin. Neighbors clapped and cheered, their applause rolling through the street like thunder. Daniel smiled for the first time in weeks. Not because Derek was gone, not even because the trial was over, but because his daughter, his little girl, was laughing again. Some men think intimidation makes them powerful. Derek Miles had believed that a vest and a clipboard made him untouchable, but he learned the truth in the hardest way. Real power doesn't come from fear, it comes from justice. And when you harm a child, especially the child of a man who knows both the badge and the weight of fatherhood, justice becomes personal, permanent, and unforgettable.